Battleship Potemkin movie review. So there's a dilemma when you're making anything for YouTube. You never know who's going to watch it. I mean, it could be anyone, right? So with a movie like Battleship Potemkin, there's probably somebody out there who's saying, "Ah, yes, I've studied this movie a million times in film school. I know all about it." And then there's somebody out there probably who's like, "I've never heard of this film before. What's this?" So, with apologies, I'm going to give some brief background on this, even though I know probably most people are already familiar with this film. This is an old silent film from 1925. It's a Russian film, or a Soviet film, and it's considered one of the most famous films of all time, or at least like one of the most influential. If you ever take any kind of film studies course, you will probably study this film. And in fact, that's where I first heard about it. I was taking a film studies course in high school, and our teacher showed us parts of this film for that course. He didn't show us the whole film. The whole film is actually quite long, but he showed us the famous Odessa stairs sequence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What is this film? So, this film was made in 1925, and it was made to commemorate the 1905 failed uprising. So, for you history nerds out there, the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917, but there was another uprising 10 years earlier, 12 years earlier, in 1905, which I think was not Bolshevik. It was had mixed ideology, but it was kind of a mass uprising in 1905 that was unsuccessful. 12 years before the Bolshevik Revolution, and then when the Bolsheviks were in power in the 1920s, they commissioned a film to commemorate that 1905 revolution. Failed revolution. Now, one of the famous moments in that 1905 revolution is there was a Battleship Potemkin, which was supposed to be, like one of the Tsarist battleships, but the sailors mutinied and ended up joining the revolution instead of supporting the government that they were supposed to support, and so they ended up not firing on the people like they were supposed to, but they fired on the government buildings instead. Or at least that's the mythology of it. If you go onto Wikipedia, there's like what actually happened, and then there's the mythology of it. But the mythology, the Soviet mythology that has been created afterwards, is that, what I just said essentially. So this film filmed in 1925, it's a silent film, so it's got the music on it, and then it's got something happening, and then the words will come on screen. Originally all done in Russian, of course, but it's easy to translate those silent movies into English. You just change the word cards. It's an early example of propaganda movie. And I'll get more into that later, but the most famous scene in the movie is called the Odessa Steps scene. So this is a scene of the 1905 revolution. The masses are kind of rallying, and then the soldiers come to put down the revolution, and they are marching down the steps, firing at the crowd. The whole sequence... You can find this on YouTube quite easily. Just put into the search engine Battleship Potemkin Odessa Stairs. The whole sequence is quite gripping, where the people are pleading with the soldiers not to shoot them, but the soldiers are kind of mercilessly, without mercy, going down the steps just like a machine and firing. And then it culminates with a baby carriage that the mother is trying to protect the baby, but then she gets hit by the bullets, and the baby carriage goes down the steps. None of that actually happened. There was actually no massacre on the Odessa steps, but it was they created that sequence for the movie, and it's been one of the most famous sequences in film history, and has been either parodied or made homages to many times. Most famous one is the Untouchables, that Kevin Costner movie, where it's an homage, but they just kind of took it directly. Like the baby carriage going down the steps was just taken very directly from the Battleship Potemkin. It was also since parodied in The Naked Gun, although they were parodying the Untouchables version of it more than the original film. Wikipedia has a long list of kind of all the movies that have paid homage to the Odessa Stairs sequence, and they appear to be including in their list any sequence that had stairs in them. So, for example, The Godfather, when somebody gets shot on the stairs, is apparently a reference to the Odessa Stairs. Star Wars 3, Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin marches up the stairs with his fascist followers, is apparently a reference to the Odessa Stairs. Yeah, if you can hear the skepticism in my voice, some of these seem to be stretching a little bit. I'm not sure they're all references to the Battleship Potemkin, although who knows, they might be. But definitely a lot of movies have overtly referenced it. So when I was in high school, our film studies teacher showed us the Odessa Stairs sequence, and I remember it as being quite gripping, you know, even though it's a very old movie. I thought, wow, this is intense. And then I was in the video store, and I saw the Battleship Potemkin, and I remembered how intense that Odessa Stairs sequence had been. And I thought, oh, maybe this would be interesting to watch, and besides, it's one of those movies like I felt like I should watch, you know, like every cultured person should watch this movie because, you know, it's one of those great silent films of all time. So I rented it, and yeah, what can I say? It is one of the most famous silent films of all time, supposedly very influential in film history. Probably every cultured person should watch it, but it's boring, or large portions of it are. I mean, you know, it's not the film's fault. It's just modern movies are so different than what they were in 1925. That Odessa step scene still holds up. Like, that is still really gripping even today. But that's actually a very small portion of the movie. The whole movie, if you actually sit through it from beginning to end, is a bit boring to sit through. But yeah, it's one of those famous films that probably everyone should watch anyway. So you know, it never killed anyone to be a little bit bored. The movie is one of the first examples of film propaganda, and again, if you read Wikipedia, it apparently blew people away with how, what's the word I'm looking for? How influential it was, how much it made people feel. Watching it now, it struck me as just over the top. I mean, I think like the best propaganda is where you don't even realize it's propaganda. You know, you think you're just watching a Hollywood film, and you don't even realize how, like, you know, it's got like this pro-military theme in it, or, you know, something like that. This is not subtle at all. They are really hitting you over the head with everything. Being kind of a Marxist film, there's a portrayal of an evil priest, and it is just so over the top. So I found it a little bit hard just kind of, yeah, getting into it, I guess. It's like the film could not stop reminding you that it was a piece of Soviet propaganda. And I don't know if this is just because the movie is so old and techniques have changed, or because it was a Soviet movie and the Soviets weren't subtle about their propaganda. I don't know. I think a lot of this film was supposedly influential. I think people talk about the montage being one of the first films to incorporate montages. So, like, if you're into film history, you can see it was like the first to do stuff. But like, you know, these old films that were the first to do stuff, the problem with being the first is then everybody afterwards imitates it so much that when you go back and watch the first one, you're like, oh, what's the big deal? Films do that all the time. Yeah, I really don't have that much more intelligent things to say. Yeah, there's a lot more stuff on Wikipedia if you want to get into the history or influences of this film. I guess to sum up, it's a bit boring, but what do you expect? It's a 1925 silent film. The Odessa stairs sequence is still gripping. Unfortunately, that's only a small portion of the whole film. You should probably watch it anyways, just because it's kind of one of those famous cultured films that every educated person should watch. But if you can't be bothered with it, just watch the Odessa stair sequence, which you can find on YouTube easily.